Shalom. The water for joining today. Today's lesson, we'll be talking about we were cast away for our punishment, but not for our destruction. Talking about us Negro, Latino, Native Americans, who are the true biblical Israelites. But before we get into that lesson, let's go and give all honor and glory and praises to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, QADASH, Bracket the YAHAWAH, Bracket the YAHAWASHI, Bracket the YAHAWAH, Bracket the YAHAWASHI, Bracket the YAHAWAH, Bracket the YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, QADASH. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect, who are the house of David reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Yasharallah. We're known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. So, like I said, today's lesson is going to be talking about our casting away, us Israelites that is, and how we were cast away from the land of Israel by our God, that being the God of the Bible. But he did that not to destroy us as a people, but to punish us and to teach us lessons and to ultimately cultivate us so that way we could be ready for the rulership once it comes in, when the Messiah, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, comes back and basically takes over the world and sets up a new world order, should I say the true world order, with the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, the Israelites, in co-rulership with him. Okay, and by the way, the Messiah's true biblical name is YAHAWASHI, right? That's Hebrew for he is salvation, he delivers. Okay, so let's go and get started with the scripture that talks about, it gives us it's a beautiful summary of what happened to us Israelites and how we got basically cast out of the land of Israel because of our rebelliousness, right? We failed to follow the laws of the Lord, and he ultimately had to basically punish us for being that rebellious people, and for breaking our contract that we made with him when he took us out of Egypt. Okay, so to get started, let's go and read Baruch chapter 2. Okay, this is Baruch chapter 2 and 1. Therefore, YAHAWAH hath made good his word, which he pronounced against us, and against our judges that judged Israel, and against our kings, and against our princes, and against the men of Israel and Judah. Okay, and what is this talking about? This is talking about back when the Israelites, when we got taken out of the land of Egypt and we were dwelling in the wilderness. Moses, he had gone up to the mountain to receive the laws and the commandments from the Lord, basically the stone tablets that had the 10 commandments on them. Right now, ultimately, there's 613 laws that the Lord gave us, and most of those are laws for the priesthood. But the point being is that Moses, after coming back down from the mountain, he had gathered all of us Israelites there to explain to us, what these laws were for, and ultimately he made a contract between us and the Most High. Okay, and in this contract, you can read about it in Deuteronomy chapter 28, right? Chapter 1 or verse 1 through 15 explains all the blessings and benefits we would get from following the laws and the commandments. And then from 15 all the way down to the end of that chapter, which is about 68 verses or something like that, it tells about all the curses that would come upon us and would destroy us, and how we wouldn't be able to escape them if we failed to follow the laws that the Lord set before us here in this book. Okay, and this is the promises that is being spoken about here, that the Lord has made good upon them, right? Basically meaning he's brought those curses that he said he would bring upon us if we didn't follow the laws. Let's continue. Verse 2. To bring upon us great plagues, such as never happened under the whole heaven, as it came to pass in Jerusalem, according to the things that were written in the law of Moses. Right? And what are some of these things that has come upon us, that has destroyed us? Well, when we look at the Assyrians that came and took us away in 700 BC and kept us in captivity, and then not only that's been done before, but what we Northern Kingdom did right? Us, the Northern Kingdom being the Latinos and Native Americans, we went to a whole different place on the earth, which never was known about, right? From the people of the world at that time, right? We went to a whole different area of the earth, known as the Americas, or the Bible refers to it as Azareth. Azareth is a Hebrew word for unknown land. Okay, so that's one thing that never happened under heaven before. What's the other thing that happened, right? Well, you had the 70 AD destruction of Jerusalem, which affected the southern kingdom, the so-called Negroes, right? Where Rome decided to put an end to the Jewish state. They came in and absolutely slaughtered a large amount of southern kingdom Israelites, and ultimately took a bunch of them into the kingdom of Rome, and filled their slave markets, and the rest fled into basically the surrounding areas, but mainly into Africa, namely on the west coast of Africa. Okay, that was something that had never been done before. And then fast forward for about another, 1,500 years, that the Lord again then fulfilled His promise to bring the Israelites, to bondage again through ships. He took the southern kingdom that had now been refugees in South America, or South Africa, excuse me, South and West Coast of Africa. He had ultimately taken them into slavery, which we understand as the North Atlantic slave trade, and he brought them over here to the Americas to meet up with their brethren, the Northern Kingdom of Israel. And again, that has never been done to that rate, right? There's never been such a large operation or large endeavor involving slavery than what happened to the Southern Kingdom brothers, right, with the North Atlantic slave trade, right? Almost a whole nation of people were transported across the Atlantic Ocean to be planted in a new land, that being the Americas, right? And why did they do that? Well, because you see, the Lord had just finished putting the Northern Kingdom, basically the one half of the Northern Kingdom, the so-called Latinos, into captivity under the Europeans, right? Basically about 80% of us were killed off due to the harsh captivity and slavery that we were put through, right? And there's so many books and testimonies about what happened to the Latinos under the European captivity, so to the point where we were almost wiped out completely, and they had to actually replace us with another viable labor group. And that's where the Southern Kingdom of Israel came in, the so-called Negroes, who were dwelling on the west coast of Africa. And why would this happen? Because again, this is all ultimately a divine intervention by the Lord to ultimately pay us back for breaking the contract we made with Him back when He brought us out of Egypt. Let's continue. Chapter 3, or verse 3. That a man should eat the flesh of his own son and the flesh of his own daughter. Moreover, He hath delivered them to be in subjection to all the kingdoms that are round about us, to be as a reproach and a desolation amongst all the people round about, where Yahawah hath scattered them. And that's what's happening, man. See, the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, though we do a lot for the nations that we are captives under, right? Like, for example, if you look at the current captivity of our nation today, we're seen as the lowest people of the society, right? And this has to do because of our enemies, how they've culturally destroyed us as a people, right? They pushed whoredom on the women, they pushed faggotry on the men, right? Our people are completely destroyed because we don't know who we are, and we're ultimately following the ways of the devil. Okay, this is why you have within the Latin and the so-called black communities, you have this gangster rap, kill mentality amongst our people. You have a drug and gangster, or basically hustling culture amongst our people, and this is what's ultimately lifted up as an example for our people to follow. And who is ultimately pushing that? Well, none other than our enemies, these Amalekites, the Edomites, who run the TV stations, the large music industry. And I'm talking about specifically of the Edomites, the Amalekites, the so-called Israelis. right? And why do they do this? Why do they push such perverse culture amongst our people? Well, because you see, they're ultimately trying to destroy us and make sure that we don't return back to our Lord. Because when we do, there's something that happens to us, is that we become unconquerable. Okay, the Lord starts to work with us, and these other nations, they can't compete against us. In fact, let me get that real quick. Let's go to the book of Judith. I'm gonna read to you that part that explains this so beautifully. Let's find it real quick. This is Judith. We're going to read Judith chapter 5, verse 17. To give you a bit of context, this is the northern kingdom before we were casted out of the land of Israel, okay? What had happened is the Assyrians had ultimately gained power of the known world at this time. But for the most part, the nations around hadn't basically been paying the Assyrian king as much respect as he wanted, right? So he decided to go out to the nations and ultimately just put them under the sword and destroy their idol worshiping and the worshiping of their own gods. And he was going to force all the nations to have them worship the Assyrian king as a god, okay? Basically, it's kind of like what you see in the movie 300, where you had the Persians go out to the other nations and conquer them. That's basically what happened in this case, but it was by the Assyrians. And at this point, the Assyrians had already gone out and they had conquered other nations, the Ammonites, the so-called Japanese, and other people, and they had finally come to the northern kingdom of Israel. And we were dwelling. We dwelt at. When you look at Jerusalem, or basically Israel, we're on the top of a series of mountains. Okay, so these Assyrians had come up to us, and these other nations surrounding us. When the Assyrians came, the other nations thought these Assyrians were for their benefit, and they would go out of their gates and they would, greet them and put on nice little festivals for them. But they ultimately were destroyed. Well, when the Assyrians came to the northern kingdom of Israel, we shut up at the gates. We didn't come down. We didn't greet them. We basically prepared for war. And the general Heliophanes of the Assyrians, he basically was perplexed and wondering why we did not come out to greet him. Why didn't we commune with him, right? And he ultimately got a general from the Ammonite army or the Ammonite nation, and he had told him, hey, who are these people who dwell in these lands up here on these mountains, and why don't they come down to me? And this is what the Ammonite, the Japanese, general or captain had ultimately told Heliophanes about us. And this particular part is him explaining to this Assyrian general that if we do not sin against our God, we're indestructible. So let's go and read that. This is Judith chapter 5, verse 17. And whilst they sinned not before their God, they prospered, because the God that hateth iniquity was with them. But when they departed from the way which he appointed them, they were destroyed in many battles, very sore, and were led captives into a land that was not theirs. And the temple of their God was cast to the ground, and their cities were taken by the enemies. But now they are returned to their God, and are come up from the places where they were scattered, and have possessed Jerusalem, where their sanctuary is, and are seated in the hill country, for it was desolate. Now, therefore, my lord and governor, if there be any error in this people, and they sin against their God, let us consider that this shall be their ruin, and let us go up, and we shall overcome them. But if there be no iniquity in their nation, let my Lord now pass by, lest their Lord defend them, and their God before them, and we become a reproach before all the world. You see that? So that's why these devils that control this world right now, this is why they put pork in all the food products. This is why they push out debaucherous, lewd entertainment for our people. This is why they push wickedness amongst our people. Because why? Because they're ultimately hoping that we commit the sin, so that way God doesn't deal with us anymore, right? And they hate when we get this truth, or when we try to correct ourselves, right? This is why whenever you see people of our nation who are going out there trying to do good for our people, you always see they come up with some sort of problem with it, right? They always come up with some sort of animosity against them. The government comes out with requiring all these permits, or they get pushed as radicals, right? And that's because they don't want us to get right. They want us to continue to stay in these states of iniquity, where we just have sin upon us, so that way the Lord doesn't deal with us. And in fact, that's why we constantly see in our people, we're always getting shot down by cops. We're getting always the short end of the stick in this society, right? We're doing the majority of the work, right? But the thing is we're always being persecuted. And that's because right now, these devils that currently rule over us, what does the Bible say? Those that hate thee shall rule over thee. That's them. And they understand what our weakness is, and that's sin. And once they cause us to sin, that's why we ultimately are being destroyed. And you could just, in a perfect example of the wickedness that we do, if you look at the current testimonies going on with the Puff Daddy and his nasty whore ex-girlfriend, who, all the nasty shit that they were doing, you just see the type of lasciviousness that gets pushed out to our people to ultimately then get replicated and reproduced by all the other brainless peons of our people, who see this shit and see it as some sort of a benefit. Okay, but again, these times are soon to come to an end, and we can see that happening now with Esau's kingdom starting to come to a collapse. We can see it with his movies no longer getting as much play as they did. The music industry is basically collapsing. Nobody's really buying these albums because it's a bunch of filth and it's stupid, right? This is why people still listen to a lot of the old music around and stuff, because again, all that magic that Esau was performing with his music, with his movies, with his entertainment in general, is now for the most part starting to implode upon itself, because people aren't buying that bullshit anymore. So let's continue. So back in Baruch chapter 2 verse 4, moreover, he hath delivered them to be in subjection to all the kingdoms that are round about us, to be a reproach and a desolation amongst all the people round about, where Yahawah hath scattered them. Right? This is talking about us. Right? The Lord has delivered us to these other nations, so we could ultimately be destroyed and be a reproach amongst these societies. Okay, this is why we're always pushed as the most as the criminals of society, the people who cause the worst things to happen. But really, when you look at what's happening and you look at the statistics, it's not us who are the evil people, right? We don't create the most crimes. It's just that the statistics and the news pushes us as the villains, right? But really, it's these Edomites, right? First and foremost, who are the real wicked people. They're the ones starving and killing and decimating these people over there in the land of Gaza, right? They're the ones who are the pedophiles and the mass murderers out there, the serial killers, right? The ones who are putting poisons in the air, the food, the land, right? Destroying the mental health of the people out there by putting out these perverse, notions. Just look at the horror movie industry, man. Look how much money is being made off of that, right? And all that shit right there, it spiritually defiles you, man, by seeing people being killed, by seeing these demons and these horror movies, all coming out, man. See, that's a wicked secret weapon that these devils use. So it says, verse 5, thus we were cast down and not exalted, because we have sinned against the Lord our God, and have not been obedient unto his voice. To Yahawah our God appertaineth righteousness, but unto us and to our fathers open shame as appeareth this day. So even till this day, when you look at our people, we're completely destroyed, and shame's upon us, because when you look at our people, you look at the people who are pushed up as our so-called leaders, right? These women who are the Jennifer Lopez who fucking run through men with all her divorces, right? Raising up a homosexual daughter so that way Jennifer Lopez could get her Illuminati fucking credentials, so she could, you know, still be praised within that industry, right? Things like Puff Daddy, man, doing all this wicked shit, entrapping other people for Amalek or these Edomites' sake, right? Our people are completely destroyed. Hey, Shalom, Tawada for joining. So that being said, so that right there shows you, man, that this is, again, is in Baruch. This is the scribe of Jeremiah who wrote this, man. See, and so just as it had happened back in this time here, because remember, Jeremiah came after the northern kingdom had been cast away, and also I believe what was it? And it was right before the southern kingdom. Yeah, before the southern kingdom were cast away, right? So he was writing all these events that took place back in this time, which is still true till this day. And in fact, we're coming to the very end of this casting away, and now that great falling away is now over, right? And now the Lord is now reaching his hand out and pulling back our people, right? But again, as scriptures say, only 1 out of every 3 Negro, Latino, Native Americans, and all those whose fathers' lineage goes back to that bloodline, are going to actually hear what is being spoken, and, you know, by the prophets, you know, starting with the apostles, the elders of Great Millstone, and all the other Akim out there teaching the same doctrine. And while the other 2/3 of our people are going to hear this truth, disregard it, think it's a bunch of BS, or basically just be too busy to even consider it. Those 2/3 are going to be destroyed. But again, the 1/3 of our people are going to wake up and are going to come back. Hey, Khan, the water for joining, and Khan, double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone. So doing this amazing work, man. So let's go on and move on to Psalms 83 and 2, because one thing about our destruction, it didn't just happen in 1 month or 1 year or instantly. This was a divine intervention that the Lord did to take us down systematically over a long period of time, and he used a lot of these other nations to do it jointly, right? And in fact, we're going to read how these other nations came together to ultimately destroy us as a people over history, okay? This is Psalms 83, and let's get 83 and 1. It says, "Keep not thou silence, Yahawah, behold, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O Yahawah, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lift up the head." Meaning that all these other nations that are against the Most High, right? Namely these Edomites who hate the Lord, right? Because they understand that the Lord is not for them. The majority of these other nations, they know that the God of the Bible is not for their nation. This is why they don't push Christianity. This is why, in fact, they ban Christianity in some of these nations, right? Because they understand that the Bible is only a Bible for the Israelites. And the majority of these other nations, the leadership of these other nations, understand that we, the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, are the actual Israelites, and that the Israelis over there in the land of Jerusalem are the imposters. But they're not going to come out and say it, because there is a confederacy, there's a contract that is made with all these other nations that are currently ruling the world, right? They understand that as long as we are kept down, that they can rise up and they can have their pound of flesh. They can have their 15 minutes of fame, which is shortly coming to an end. It says, verse 3, "They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones," meaning that these devils have even used witchcraft to come up against us, okay? This is why this is why you see all the politicians and people of renown in these societies, the people who have actual power, they're all being photographed or seen around known witches like Abrina Abramovich, or all these other, I forgot their names and stuff, like the witches amongst the Hollywood elites, right? Performing spirit cookings, and you hear about, you know, the Podesta brothers, Tony Podesta and his brothers, have, you know, inviting Hillary Clinton to these spirit cookings and these pizza parties, which are really just, it's a name for, you know, child sacrificing and child molestation. All right, beautiful, beautiful. You know, brothers and sisters are starting to wake up to this truth. So that's beautiful that you're watching these videos and stuff, okay? Because again, the Lord says He's going to pour out His Spirit upon all flesh, man and female, and just like there's a lot of men of our people waking up, you're going to have women of our people waking up too. So, Shalom, Akwah, and you know, let's continue. So, back to this. It says, verse 4, they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. And when you see that what this is talking about is ultimately how they ultimately erased our heritage from us, which fulfills the Jeremiah 17:4. And let's actually get that real quick, because I love that scripture. Because that right there explains exactly why the Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, the majority of our people don't understand, you know, who we are and our records that go back. Because one, history is not pushed amongst our people. When you look into to the education of our people, right? We've been miseducated on purpose. Okay, this is why when you don't learn about Native American history or Latino history or so-called Negro history, right? You only learn about Edomite history, right? George Washington and all that bullshit that's all basically been embellished, right? You don't hear about Aslan and how it talks about how the Latinos are gonna basically be lifted up into the air like eagles and ultimately taken back to our homeland, Aslan, which borders the land of Babylon, okay? That being the Israel, right? You don't hear about the testimonies about how the native Indians over here were telling the Spanish friars and missionaries that we were of our respective tribes of the children of Israel, right? You don't hear about that. And why is that? Well, because again, they are purposely trying to hide this history from us. Because why? Well, because again, if the world was to understand that the Negro, Latino, Native Americans are the actual Israelites of the Bible, then the power structure of this current world wouldn't go on. And that's why right now the Lord is waking people up and reaching out to the Negro, Latino, Native Americans to tell us, you know, what this truth is. He's putting the Spirit on the apostles, the elders, brothers like me, you, Akim, out there to spread this word, not only, you know, out on the streets, but on comment boards, on videos that give out false information, right? All this little bits of information that's going out, spreading by, like I said, by the apostles, Akim like you, elders and whatnot. All that's causing little fissures and cracks within Esau's narrative and what's happening little by little, and we're all should be seeing it. You're starting to see a lot more people understanding that the Negro, Latino, Native Americans are the biblical Israelites. And again, when I first came into this truth about 10 years ago, you know, that whole notion, when you would say it, it was considered outlandish. People were like, what? That makes no sense, right? But nowadays, you know, you come across, you know, people of our nation that aren't necessarily in this truth, but you tell them that, you say, hey, do you know that we're the Israelites? And they're like, yeah. See, because little by little, this truth starts to creep into every facet of life. It starts to explain why explain away a lot of the misconceptions that is pushed upon our people, okay? And it can explain, and it connects a lot of the conspiracy theories which are in this world, which is why Esau has started to push out false conspiracy theories, right? The whole flat earth, the 786, you know, thing that's starting to come out now, which is really just a bunch of pedophiles and Esau trying to you know, push out lascivious sexual behavior upon the world, right? But the whole point being is that these devils, they have tried to hide this truth for the longest time, and they're ultimately well, now they can't really do shit about it anymore, because the truth is now coming out, and you can't fight against the truth because the truth will always prevail. Okay, because what is it? See, I forgot how the saying goes, but see, these people who are lying have to lie all the time, and they have to get lucky all the time to be able to explain away the inaccuracies in the narrative that they're pushing, right? But the people that have the truth only have to be lucky once in explaining what's going on, right? See, they got to make sure that they are constantly, keeping that balloon up in the sky and not let it hit the ground with all their lies and everything, right? This is why when you got places like these false churches over here, who when somebody has a sincere belief, they go to the preacher there and they ask him a sincere question. The preacher just can't answer it, and they say, "Oh, just pray to God, my son," or they give them some sort of bullshit answer. And that's what happened to me, and that's what turned me away from the church. And ultimately, the Lord had mercy, and He brought me back to this truth, and explained to me that the churches aren't the churches don't teach what is actually in the Bible, and that the Bible truth is not what these churches are pushing. Okay, so let's get back to this. So again, this is Jeremiah 17:4. And thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not. For ye have kindled a fire in mine anger, which shall burn forever. Okay, so that right there shows you that we have lost our heritage, right? We've lost who we were as a people, right? And this is why our people just don't know who we are, because again, this is another explanation of why when the Europeans came over here and found us, they destroyed our records once they found out that we were the Israelites. Okay, and this is why only I think it's like 23, 24 codices of the Aztecs still exist, but all the other thousands of codices that we had were destroyed as a people, right? I'm sure the Vatican has plenty of them, but again, what is available to the public is only like 23 to 24 of them. So let's continue. It says, verse 4. Oh, and to the last point of Psalms 83, where it says, let me read it again, verse 4. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. So not only did these people basically work together to destroy us as a people, to destroy our records, and to not basically come out and acknowledge us that we were these Israelites, but they also went on and these devils, these Edomites, they went on and took our identity. Back in 740 AD, the Khazarian Edomites, who at that point started dwelling amongst like the Mongols and everything, they created a new religion known as Judaism, based off of the heritage of the, at that time, lost Israelites. Because again, the Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, we had already been cast out of Israel, and we were basically gone for close to 600 years. We had basically disappeared. Now the Negroes at this time, about 700 AD, had started to become Moors and basically Arab, living amongst the Arabs, and they were being sold off in the sub-Saharan slave trade there in Africa by the children of Ishmael, the Arabs, and the children of Ham, the true Africans, right? And they were being sold amongst the Silk Road trade, the trade system that was there. This is why so many so-called blacks had penetrated into all these different civilizations. This is why you hear about blacks amongst the early Chinese, or blacks amongst the early Japanese coming out as some of the first samurai, and so forth, because there were so many of our people who were scattered amongst these other nations, and because of the spirit that was on our people, we did great things amongst these other nations. Okay, this is why we were seen as such great people amongst these other nations, because there's a different spirit upon us, and we're able to do different things that these other nations cannot do. Okay, now that being said, let's go and move on. This is verse 5. It says, for they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee, right? And this is because when these nations, and again, these nations didn't all just come together, and sit at a round table and be like, let's take out those Israelites and let's make sure not to do this, and in 200 years you're going to do this, and in 400 years you're going to go over here to South America and you're going to take these people. No, that did not happen like that. See, what happened is eventually these nations, as they grew and they spread out throughout the world, they ran into us, okay, either in our exiled state or in our state of captivity where we were amongst other nations, right? And the whole notion that we ultimately, when people actually looked into who we were, they realized that these are the Israelites that had been scattered and they no longer possessed their land, right? Did they do anything to bring us back to our land, to re-establish us as a people? No. They decided to follow their best interest, just as the best interest of all these other nations in power, and continue to just play along and just ignore or basically disavow who we were as a people. So hence, that's the one consent that they all came together with, to decide that a world with the Israelites in existence was not a world that they could prosper in. So hence, they did what they could to make sure that we weren't able to go back into our land, that we weren't freed, that we weren't spared by the sword when they came across us. Verse 6, the tabernacles of Edom, that being the Caucasian and Israelis, the Ishmaelites, the Arabs, of Moab, the Chinese, and the Hagarenes, which are the Arabs, Gabal, which is another Edomite faction, and Ammon, the so-called Japanese, and Amalek, the Israelis, the top nation of Edom, and the Philistines, who are the true Africans, and the inhabitants of Tyre, other Africans, or Hamites, I should say, Ashur, who are the older Arab nations, like the people over there, like the Assyrians, those type of people, also is joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot, Salah. The children of Lot are the Chinese and the Japanese people, okay? And the reason why that's been mentioned is because the Japanese and the Chinese people, during the Silk Trade, the Silk Road period, back when Genghis Khan was in power, they were a very powerful empire, right? And all these nations, again, because of the Silk Road trade routes and everything, they all just kind of kept their mouths shut, and they all kind of kept prospering as a people. Damn, that's crazy, Doc. That's beautiful. I'll remember that. I'll look into it. That's a crazy coincidence, right? That Abba Bivens started his ministry around 1969, and it says, and Trump, Nero, who we know is Nero in the reincarnation, elected into office in 2024. It's 55 and a half years, or about 666 months. That's crazy. Yeah, see, and there's a lot of beautiful coincidences like that, because again, when we understand the way that the Lord works, this is why there's so many weird synchronicities in this truth, right? Things line up in ways that we can't even describe in our lower third dimensional understanding, and we all have experienced this, right? I'm sure, like for example, let's say you start reading the Bible, and then you go out into the world and you see something or you hear about something, and you could quickly tie it back to what you just read. See, those weird synchronicities is showing you that this truth that is in the Bible in its proper context, when you understand it, it's more than just a book. It's the words of the Lord, right? And why is that? Well, you see the Lord himself, he's a higher dimensional being, and his words, just as they were true back in this time, they also are relevant to today's time, because again, he's a higher dimensional being, and him and his words are not subject to the third dimensional plane which we live in, right? See, unlike us third dimensional beings, us Israelites, who again, we come from the higher realms, we're right now trapped in these chains of darkness, the bodies that we inhabit, right? And because of that, we're doomed to have to experience time 1 second at a time, where the Lord, his words, and all his force that he puts into this book, they're not constrained to this time. This is why it's we find crazy synchronicities like what you just explained, right? And there's so many other different things, but again, because we don't have the true understanding of the higher realms yet, we can't really decipher what those things mean. Like, for example, this is why the Babylonians, where gematria comes from, was the Babylonians trying to decipher, trying to break apart the timepiece, the mechanism of the higher heavens, which is why we really shouldn't get too deep into gematria, right, or numerology is what it's also referred to, because again, that's really a Babylonian practice. And yes, there's definitely a lot of synchronicities and relationships within certain words, but without the definition or the understanding of what certain things mean, it's all just a bunch of gibberish, right? We can look at it and we can see like, whoa, that's the same thing as this, or that's the same thing as that. But without the proper understanding, we could be going off. So we got to be a little bit careful with that. But either way, it's still very awesome, and it's very humbling. But to see things like that, to be able to experience, little synchronicities like that, right? But again, that's just should be something that we could experience to let us know that we are dealing with the higher powers and we're on the right track. So no, you're good. You're good, Og. You're good. You don't have to be sorry about it, but just don't dwell too much on it, right? Like for example, you shouldn't make a belief out of it, right? So that being said, it's a good to see those similarities, but don't dwell too much upon it. So let's go and get back to the teachings. So, and it says, verse 8, Ashur also is joined unto them, and they have helped the children of Lot, Salah. Do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Sisera, as to Jabin, at the brooks of Kaisan, which perished at Endor, and became as dung for the earth, right? And what that means is, that's talking about when Joshua went out and destroyed these other nations. This right here is imploring the Lord to destroy these other nations. And we understand through prophecies, through the scriptures, that is the fate of these other nations, right? This is why the Lord is allowing them to have their 15 minutes of fame, to have their empires, to have their portion under the sun, or their heaven, because when the Lord comes back, they're going to all go into captivity, namely for 1,000 years. And then after that 1,000 years, all the nations are going to be permitted to go back into their lands and be subject unto us, right? And they're going to be fine because they're going to be living a righteous life. But the nation of Edom, the Caucasian and Israelis, they won't be permitted to go back into their land of Petra. They're going to ultimately be destroyed and put out. Now, Apostle Tahar said that their souls will ultimately reincarnate into the other nations, and they're just going to amalgamate into the other nations, but there's going to be no more such thing as Caucasian or Israelis or Edomites. That's going to be a far gone concept, and it's going to be to the point where we won't even remember them, that people will be will think that we're making fibs when we bring up their history. So that being said, when you understand, when you get into more about like the captivity here in America and really around the world, you start to understand that America itself is simply just a market for these other nations to come into America and to basically make profits off of the backs of the people who are living here in America, and that namely is the Israelites, right? Yes, the other nations are also being made profit off of, but not as much as the so-called Negro Latino Native Americans. This is why when you look at these stores here in the strip mall, or if you look at like stores like this, right, which it looks like a Mexican store, but I bet you if you look at it, it's owned by some type of Chinese or Japanese or Egyptian people, or like this store here. It's very famous in this area, apparently, but it's a dairy place, but it's owned by Egyptians, right? And you're always seeing things like that in our neighborhoods, right? You see these other nations basically taking advantage of our people, right? We're the Mexican, the black owners, and the Native American owners within our own neighborhoods. You don't see that. And why is that? Well, because again, we are being made a product by these people here in America, Babylon the Great, right? We are that product that doesn't leave, right? This is why these other nations, when they want to come into the American market, they have to literally pay to access this market before they start selling their goods in here, right? I was tripped out when I found that out, that you had to have access to the American markets. These people, and particularly these car manufacturers, which is what I was looking into at the time, they have to pay like a subscription fee to be allowed to sell their products in America to the people. And then not only on top of that, now they're going to have to be paying tariffs and taxes and import fees and all that bullshit. But that's just showing you, man, that the people who are here in America, that we're the ones that are basically being sold as merchandise to the other people, right? That's why the scriptures say that in Babylon the Great, it was souls of men that were being sold and stuff. So, well, let's go and move on to this, because this here in Wisdom of Solomon basically surmises just, what is the plight of the Negro, Latino, and Native Americans, the Israelites, here in Babylon the Great. It says, this is Wisdom of Solomon 15 verse 12. But they counted our life as a pastime, and our time here a market for gain. For say they, we must be getting every way, though it be by evil means. See that? So that's ultimately the mindset of all these businesses here in America, especially the ones that deal with our people. And again, you can see this more prevalently with the insurance companies, the medical industry, right? They're right now being lambasted up there on Capitol Hill, and Congress is actually I think it's all state right now who is being investigated, or basically they're right now at the Congress hearings, talking about how they could pay their CEOs millions of dollars in bonuses, but they can't pay out. They're not paying out their own customers and their claims, right? And look at what just happened with that United Healthcare CEO, right? And that guy who killed him, Luigi, right? See, this is a sign that shows you, man, that these devils are here, using us as a market for gain. They don't care if it's by evil means, which is why you got these and you got what is it, Ian Carroll right now on the Candace Owens show doing an expose on all these equity firms. And if you're not sure what equity firms are, it's basically Esau, who has managed to make tons of money, needing to find a way to basically invest his money into other businesses. So, or should I say venture capitalists, right? Basically they're rich Edomites who basically try to find ways to make their money grow. So what they throw their money around to these different business ventures, and a lot of these business ventures, what they do is they go in, they're like vultures. They pick the bones clean of these businesses that are going into bankruptcy, and they end up selling off these businesses and firing all the people in those organizations, which a lot of them are jakes, so that way the people at the very top, the people running these venture capitalist groups that have come in, that way they can make millions of dollars of profits. This is what happened to Toys R Us, Blockbuster, and all Payless, and all these different businesses that used to be big and thriving, that have since fallen on hard times. They were basically decimated. And again, who does that affect? It affects our people. Because why? Because it's our neighborhoods that these businesses no longer can operate in. We now have to, the market gets smaller and smaller, hence prices no longer become competitive. Our people lose jobs, and these Edomites who are sitting on top, they don't give a fuck, because as long as they get their millions, then they're good. Okay, so that shows you, man, that these devils don't care if it's a righteous way to make money, as long as it makes them profit. And a good movie for this is The Wolf on Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio, or even what was it, that movie Wall Street, and Wall Street 2 with Shia LaBeouf. Right, these guys straight up come out, these Edomites come out, and they straight are proud of how corrupt they are and the way they make money. With the movies like Boilerplate, where they show they pump up stocks before they push them out. You had that famous thing going on with GameStop a couple years back, where these venture capitalists try to go into this failing company, GameStop, and they were going to basically implode it. And that way they were going to basically suck it dry of all of its profits. But again, the internet community came together and started to buy up the stock of GameStop, which basically made it almost impossible for these venture capitalists to destroy it. And they ultimately got destroyed. But see, that right there shows you that this whole system of the corporate markets that are here in America, Babylon the Great, feasting upon the people here, namely us Israelites, that it's a savage world that, a lot of us don't even understand. Because why? Because we're not allowed at that table. That's not for us. That's for these devils who feed off of our backs and off of our labor and off of our money. Okay, to show you, man, this Bible is talking specifically about our situation in this wicked ass kingdom. So let's go to Maccabees, because ultimately what's going to happen to these devils, the ones that are in power, You know, see, the thing is these Edomites, they think that they're fine, and they think that they can continue to be as evil as they want to be, and it doesn't matter how they get to the top of the hill, because as long as they win at the end, no matter how they win, that they're never going to have to pay for it, right? See, the thing is that's not the truth. These Edomites are only been appointed a time to rule for a particular time, and they ain't going to be able to pass that, and they're ultimately going to have to pay for everything that they've done, right? Good and bad, regardless. But the point being is that at the end of all of that, or should I say on the top of all of that, their godless nature, where they could believe in everything. They'll believe in Krishna and Buddhism. They'll believe in science, and they'll believe in everything else. But they believe in Satan, but they just do not believe in God. Now that's ultimately a curse upon the descendants of Cain, who Esau ultimately was when he came back in the reincarnation. Because again, if you're not sure, if you weren't aware of that, Esau is Cain in the reincarnation. So hence, this is why these Edomites, they can't believe in God, right? They don't believe in him at all. So again, to you know, a little side note, for all those people worried about the so-called white people, right, talking about, oh, they're good people, they believe in God. More likely, those Edomites that believe in God, if they are literally believing in the God of the Bible, then chances are they're not even Edomites. Their chances are they're white-colored different nations, namely Israelites. But the point being is that these Edomites, the true Edomites, the Israelis, in the top echelon of these Caucasian races, and just the vile, you know, Caucasians of the society, they're godless. And again, this is why they do the things that they do, because they don't believe that there's an afterlife. They don't believe that there's ever going to be a spiritual comeuppance for them, right? This is why they do all that wicked shit. But this is what the Bible tells you is going to befall them. Okay, this is 2nd Maccabees. Let me get this real quick. Because this was the let me make sure real quick, because this is the sons of the southern kingdom, the 7 sons that were put to death by the Greeks, because they wouldn't bow down to these Greek ways and eat pork, and I think it was Antiochus who put them all to death one at a time, because they wouldn't bow down to his will. But what happened is there was this beautiful, big ass plane. There's this beautiful reproach, or this beautiful basically shit talking to these Edomites about what is their ultimate end. What do they have to look forward to versus what we have to look forward to, right? And this is in regards to their godless behaviors. This is 2nd Maccabees 7:34. But thou, O godless man, again, this is talking to these Edomites, the current people who are in power right now, the Israeli and the Caucasian race. But thou, O godless man, and of all other most wicked, be not lifted up without a cause, nor puffed up with uncertain hopes, lifting up thy hand against the servants of God. For thou hast not yet escaped the judgment of the Almighty God, who seeth all things. For our brethren, who now have suffered a short pain, and are dead under God's covenant of everlasting life, but thou, through the judgment of God, shalt receive just punishment for thy pride. But I and my brethren offer up my body and life for the laws of our fathers, beseeching God that he would speedily be merciful unto our nation, and that though by torments and plagues mayest confess that he alone is God, and that in me and my brethren the wrath of the Almighty, which is justly brought upon all our nation, may cease. See, so that right there is ultimately what the whole matter is, right? With these Edomites, though they think that they've built their nation, they have their skyscrapers, they have their billions of dollars, they have their, you know, all their luxuries and everything, and they're living off the fatness of the earth, they have not yet escaped the judgment of the Almighty, right? A lot of these Edomites like to talk about the Bible. Oh, that's all the way back there in biblical times. They don't realize that we're still in biblical times, and that these Edomites, they still haven't finished, their course. And the difference between these wicked Edomites who currently rule the world and us Israelites, though we may fall and we may be destroyed as a people, we may be punished, we still are under the covenant of the Lord, where we're still promised immortality. We're still promised the kingdom of heaven, and to be ruling in the kingdom of heaven with the Messiah. Where these Edomites, they're still promised ultimate destruction and captivity. Okay, and that is what they will not escape. So like Apostle Tahar said, man, time is on our side, right? See, that's what these devils don't realize, though. They may be winning right now for the moment. In the long run, they're going to be destroyed as a people for the wickedness that they've done. So again, the best thing they could do is just give up and restore us back to our position and apologize for everything they've done. But they ain't going to do that, right? They're going to literally fight against God, thinking that they're going to have a chance with them. This is why we're starting to see that these Edomites now have warp technology, right, which is being released with those leaks from the Malaysian flight that went missing a couple of years ago. I think it was like 10 years ago or something, right? These devils, and also China has this amazing like stealth fighter that can do all these amazing things. They could launch drones, and it could go faster than any other fighter out there. And then you have Trump out there talking about, we have the strongest weapons that the world has ever known, and all this stuff. None of that shit is going to be able to save you devils from your punishment, right? And again, the Lord is allowing these devils to get as powerful as they were, as they are, because just as what he did to Pharaoh when he hardened his heart and he raised them up, simply so that way he could be exalted in their destruction, in destroying them. And that's exactly what's going to happen, right? The Lord is allowing the current nations of the world right now who have exalted themselves over the Israelites, over us. He's allowing them to get big and to grow strong, so that way when the time comes and he destroys them with no effort, that he will ultimately be exalted as the true power of heaven, the true God of the world, right? Of the universe, I should say, right? Because again, it's a little thing for the Lord to rise up these other nations simply just to destroy them, right? That's what he did to Pharaoh, and that's what he's currently doing to these Edomites. So that being said, let's go and read this Akim, and then we'll basically be done for today's lesson. We're gonna read Jeremiah, because just like I was saying, right, these Edomites, they think they got they got everything in the bag. They think that they've won, but like I just said, the Lord's gonna ultimately still bring that punishment upon these Edomites. The time just hasn't come yet. And when the Lord does finally bring the judgment upon these Edomites, he's gonna use us Israelites to bring that judgment, right? He's gonna make us into these godlike men, and just like you've seen in that movie, what was it, with Will Smith, Hancock, right, where he was like a Superman type figure. That's going to be all of us, right? The elect, I should say, right? The 144,000. We're going to have that power, and also the 1/3, right? We're going to be a special people. We're going to be a godlike people upon the face of the earth, right? We're going to have that power, and what are we going to use that power for? Well, it's going to be to take back the world and destroy these other nations, and namely these Edomites. We're going to be pulling them out of their deep underground bases, and we're going to be putting them straight into captivity. So let's go and read that. This is Jeremiah 51. Jeremiah 51 and 18, 20. This is Jeremiah 51 and 20. Thou art my battle axe and weapons of war. Right, this is God talking to us Israelites. Okay, the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, and all those whose father's lineage goes back to that bloodline. For with thee will I break in pieces the nations, and with thee will I destroy the kingdoms, and with thee will I break into pieces the horse and his rider, and with thee will I break in pieces the chariot and his rider. With thee also will I break in pieces man and woman, and with thee will I break in pieces old and young, and with thee will I break in pieces the young man and the maid, and I will also break in pieces with thee the shepherd and his flock, and with thee will I break in pieces the husbandman and his yoke of oxen, and with thee will I break in pieces captains and rulers, and I will render unto Babylon and to all the inhabitants of Chaldea all their evil that they have done in Zion in your sight, saith Yahawah BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI. You see that? So the Lord is ultimately going to use us to destroy these devils. Now he's ultimately going to, the angels also are going to be here destroying these other nations, putting down the laser beams, you know, launching the nuclear missiles, right? Because remember, there's testimonies from these nuclear site, you know, guardsmen saying that they had no control, that UFOs would come by and they would activate the missiles, the nuclear missiles, and they couldn't do anything, right? That they were simply there, and that there was shadow men in the hallways, right? And what it is that's all that is all gonna come together in the very end, man. We're gonna have the Israelites, we're gonna be given these spiritual powers, and we're gonna be going out and destroying all these wicked people of this world who have destroyed this world, destroyed our people, and basically tried to go against God, right? So that right there is our casting away, Akim. So understand that we were put into captivity because, one, we broke the covenant with the Lord, right? We broke our contract with the Lord, but in our punishment, that's where our cultivation and our training came up, right? This is where we learned to be humble. This is where we learned to be a truthful people, and we're now witnessing what it is for wickedness to reign over the world. We now have a proper understanding of evil, and that's ultimately what Adam and Eve were told not to, you know, to partake in back in the Garden of Eden, to not partake of the tree of good and evil, right? Because the thing is we had to get that knowledge little by little throughout what we understand as history, and we're now getting that, and we're seeing what it is when evil reigns, and what happens when you allow evil to come in and get power, right? Now, a lot of these 2/3 people like Puff Daddy, Jay-Z, Ricky Martin, and all these people of our nations who have sold out and joined onto that evil, they haven't gotten that lesson, so hence they're going to be destroyed. Now they're ultimately going to come back into the kingdom, right, in a righteous state, but we're going to understand who they are when they get reborn, and they're going to understand too, but they will be forgiven. But they're going to, you know, we're all going to know that, hey, look, that was Puff Daddy, that freak that fucked up when he was here on earth. He didn't pass the test, right? But regardless, either way, hopefully this lesson was edifying, Akim. Hopefully I was able to explain that we were cast away from the land of Israel, not because the Lord hated us, but because he had to punish us for breaking the law. But in turn, he also used this opportunity to test us and to train us and to cultivate us to be the righteous people that he ultimately wants at the end of this whole event, which we understand as life. So with that, let's go and give all honor and glory and praises to Yahawah BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM QADASH, Barakah Yahawah, Barakah YAHAWASHI, Barakah Yahawah, Barakah YAHAWASHI, Barakah Yahawah, Barakah YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM QADASH. The water for joining, Akim. Hopefully all you brothers and sisters are safe, and I'll see you, Akim, next week here, Lord willing. If you have any questions, put them down in the comment board. If not, I'll see you throughout the week through my lessons. And like I said, Lord willing, here next week. Shalom.